The name Erich Hartmann echoes across the vast and violent canvas of World War II, a war fought not just on the ground, but in the unforgiving skies. Hartmann, known to his comrades as Booby, or the Kid, and dreaded by his Soviet adversaries as Der Schwarze Teufel, the Black Devil, holds an achievement that remains statistically untouchable. He is the most successful fighter ace in the entire history of aerial warfare, credited with an astonishing 352 confirmed aerial victories. To understand the scale of this feat, consider his career. He flew over 1,400 combat missions, engaging in air-to-air combat more than 825 times. Yet, despite this impossible record, the most remarkable statistic is this. Erich Hartmann was never shot down by enemy fire. His 16 forced landings were either due to mechanical failure or, more often, flying directly through the exploding debris of the enemy aircraft he had just destroyed. This extraordinary rate of survival across hundreds of duels points not to luck, but to a tactical genius that transcended the chaos of the Eastern Front. Hartmann's foundation was built long before the war. Born in 1922 in Weizsäck, Germany, his mother, Elizabeth, was one of Germany's first licensed glider pilots. He learned to fly from her, earning his glider license at just 16 and becoming an instructor by the age of 17. This early exposure to the air fostered a deep, instinctual relationship with flight. He joined the Luftwaffe in 1940. His journey from enthusiastic recruit to disciplined killer was not without its bumps. In the early stages of his training, a flash of youthful recklessness led him to perform unauthorized, high-speed acrobatics over an airfield. He was harshly reprimanded and temporarily grounded. This moment of humiliation was followed shortly after by a grave accident in which a training partner died. These events hardened the young pilot. He absorbed the lesson that recklessness was a liability. He forged a new, lifelong credo, one that he later passed on to every young wingman. Fly with your head, not with your muscles. This commitment was not about cowardice. It was about the cold, surgical application of calculated violence, and it would define his entire career. Hartmann was deployed to the brutal Eastern Front in October 1942, joining the veteran unit Jagdgeschwader 52, or JG-52. It was here, under the mentorship of seasoned pilots like Paula Rossmann, that he codified his revolutionary combat technique. Rossmann, restricted by an injury, taught Hartmann to abandon the classic protracted dogfight. Instead, he developed a four-stage process that he informally termed the coffee break concept, or the see-decide attack-break doctrine. The principle was simple. First, identify the target while controlling the highest altitude possible, because, as Hartmann argued, air superiority is always won from the top down. Second, decide only attack if there is a guaranteed advantage. If he is superior, Hartmann famously stated, then I would go home for another day that is better. Third, attack. Commit with absolute speed. And finally, break. Disengage completely after the kill to reevaluate the battle. This tactic relied on achieving total surprise. Hartmann would close the distance, often opening fire at less than 300 feet, which was point-blank range for the powerful cannons of the Messerschmitt Bf 109. This ultra-close approach prevented the enemy pilot from taking evasive action, ensured minimal ammunition waste, and, most critically, meant that up to 80% of his victims never even realized he was there until the moment he opened fire. His personal accomplishment, however, was his measure of leadership. Of all my accomplishments, I am proudest of the fact that I never lost a wingman. His calculated caution protected not just himself, but his entire unit. By May 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing. Hours before Germany's formal surrender, on May 8th, Hartmann scored his 352nd and final victory, shooting down a Soviet Yak-9 over Brano. With the Soviet army bearing down on his position, Hartmann, acting as the unit's commander, ordered the destruction of all 25 intact Messerschmitts to prevent them from falling into Soviet hands. He fired the last rounds into his own beloved plane, Karaya 1, before jumping out. Knowing the grim fate awaiting him at the hands of the Soviets, who had placed a bounty on the Black Devil's head, Hartmann made a critical decision. He led his entire unit to surrender to the American 90th Infantry Division. He sought the protection of the Western Allies, hoping for justice or at least humane treatment, especially for the women and children who had fled with his troops. But his choice was irrelevant to the architects of the New World Order. On May 24, 1945, American forces acting under the terms of the Yalta Agreement handed Hartmann and his entire command group over to the Soviet Red Army. The Yalta Protocol stipulated that all German personnel captured in what the Soviets considered their zone of operations, or those who had fought the Soviets, were to be repatriated to Soviet control irrespective of their wishes. For Hartmann, this was a devastating betrayal. He watched in horror as the Soviets immediately separated women and girls from the men, beginning what he described as a brutal orgy, confirming the very fears that had led him to seek American protection. The war in the air was over, but the war for Erich Hartmann's soul had just begun. He was subjected to relentless political pressure and psychological torture as the Soviet authorities attempted to coerce him into serving in the East German Air Force. Hartmann refused every attempt. As a consequence, he was put on a sham trial, convicted of fabricated war crimes, and sentenced to 25 years of hard labor. The charges were absurd, the most notable of which was the crime of deliberately destroying 352 expensive Soviet aircraft and damaging the Soviet economy. This openly cynical charge, punishing a soldier for performing his duty too effectively, proved the political nature of the trial. Hartmann's resistance in the Gulag was extraordinary. He refused to work and filed formal complaints against his conviction and the camp conditions. His principled defiance led to repeated solitary confinement. But his moral courage was infectious. On one occasion, his fellow German prisoners staged a revolt, overpowering the guards and freeing him from solitary confinement. His unbroken integrity became a vital symbol of resistance for thousands of prisoners. It was only in late 1955, after more than 10 years of brutal political imprisonment, that he was released as part of the last batch of Heimkeiter, repatriated German prisoners, following a trade deal negotiated by West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer. Hartmann's return home was stained with profound personal tragedy. Though he was reunited with his beloved wife Ursula, he learned that his son, Erich Peter, born during the war, had died in 1948 at the age of 3, which the Soviets had deliberately withheld from him throughout his decade of incarceration. In 1956, Hartmann chose to re-enter military service, joining the newly established West German Air Force, the Bundeswehr. He was given command of the 1st All-Jet Unit, Jagdgeschwader 71, Richthofen. But his career would conclude, ironically, not in battle, but in a final, principled confrontation with his own government. Hartmann staunchly opposed the procurement and deployment of the Lockheed 104 Starfighter. He viewed the aircraft as extremely unsafe and famously called it garbage. His criticism stemmed from his fundamental commitment to pilot safety, the same conviction that led him to boast that he never lost a wingman. His fears were tragically confirmed. Due to its high accident rate in German service, the F-104 earned the grim public nickname Widowmaker, or Widowmaker. Germany lost 292 of its 916 starfighters, and 116 German pilots died in crashes between 1961 and 1989. His unyielding opposition to the unsafe procurement earned him the enmity of the political establishment. In 1970, Erich Hartmann was forced into premature retirement. The legacy of Erich Hartmann is complex. It is a story framed by a record of unparalleled destruction, yet defined by a profound, unwavering commitment to principle. He survived the Luftwaffe, the Eastern Front, the Yalta betrayal, and the Soviet Gulag, maintaining his moral compass in the face of immense pressure. Decades later, in 1997, the Russian Federation posthumously exonerated him of all charges, declaring his Soviet conviction an act of malicious prosecution. This final official correction confirmed what he had known all along. The ultimate measure of the ace of aces may not be found in the 352 kills, but in the humanity that survived them. His final philosophical statement, forged by war, captivity, and personal loss, remains his most potent piece of advice. Never allow yourself to hate a people because of the actions of a few. This is the voice of the warrior who refused to let ideology define him, a man who, in a century of total war, remained tethered to his humanity.